Get out the insurance cards, get out the copays. The office is open, my friends. Brought to you by drroto.com.
What is up, and welcome in. We are the One and Done Show. We are your fast break of college basketball information. I am your host, Eric Romoff. You can catch me on those Twitter streets at FantasyNav. And he is still a bridesmaid, but hot damn, he's getting close. He is the captain of our ship at Green Screens Media. He is MC Holland34 on Twitter. He is Mr. Mike Holland. Mike, heading into week number 3 of the college basketball season. How you feeling?
I'm feeling good, man. Thought I had it last night. Missed it by a couple of points. Finished third in the big jam. After a stat correction, took me out a second. Thought I was going to make 4 figures, but not quite there. But another third place finish. That's my second third place finish. Had a second place finish. Some other top tens. Thought we were going to take it down 2 or 3 nights ago. So we're close. Tonight was pretty brutal with the Baylor beatdown. Did not see that coming. Marquette played an awesome game, but yeah, it's been a lot of fun, right? Like we've been nailing these shows, so I'm hoping to have another good show tonight and make the people some money out there.
It's exactly the thing, right? You are within arm's reach of shipping one of these big tournaments. Feels like every single night, and even the nights where you are not, some of our listeners are actually shipping their own tournaments. We got Sam Hogg at TCU Sam checking in, showing some of his receipts, some of his dubs. We got to see his green screen off of our show on Saturday. Our guy Corey C-Mac at C22Mac on Twitter also getting a nice dub in his tournament off that Saturday show. So the plays are absolutely dialed in. Just those bigger tournaments are a little bit harder to take down. And for this Wednesday slate, November the 30th, we have got another big one in store. 12 gamer queued up on DraftKings. You can see the $10 big jam all the way up to a $3K first place prize. So a lot of things to like about this slate. Pricing is it's kind of soft, right? There's a lot of ways that we can attack this one. So, Mike, why don't we dive in with the first game that we want to prioritize on this slate? That is North Carolina and Indiana, pushing a game total all the way up into, or at least nearing the 150s, looking at 74-68 in favor of North Carolina. So let's start off with the Tar Heels. What do we like about North Carolina coming in?
Yeah, so what a game, last game, 4 overtimes. Definitely benefited us because we had a lot of Baycott last week, and he didn't do much until the second half and then into the overtime. So it should just be another fun game. North Carolina's been playing a lot of tough teams, right? There's been some great early season matchups, but when you look at this one, this is going to be another good one. 2 of the best bigs in the country are going to be going at it here. And so when you kind of look at it here, 74-68, I think the first thing that kind of jumps out on the slate is that, there aren't too many totals that really stand out. This is according to KenPom, this is the highest total of the 12 games that we're looking at here. So we're going to have to be smart, looking at some ways to maybe game stack some of these, and hopefully it goes over. You catch an overtime game, that could be the huge difference in a tournament. But when you look at the North Carolina side, right, like it starts with Baycott. They're 12th in offensive efficiency. They're 47th in defensive efficiency and 204th in tempo. So, with Baycott, 27% usage rate, the shot rate's just not there, man. Like, Caleb Love is just, and RJ Davis are just taking a boatload of shots. But in order for them to be successful like last time, he has to be a key factor here. Now, he's going to have a tougher matchup, obviously, with the 2 guys on the other side there. But, when you combine all his metrics together, he just gives you the rebounds. He gives you the blocks. He's been a little more boom bust this year, right? 9,000, got a little bit of an uptick in price. Yes, he's playable because there's a ton of guard value on this slate. I'm going to have a good amount of exposure to him, but it's hard to ignore just how many shots Caleb Love and RJ Davis are taking in this offense. It almost seems like a shift in power there right now. And obviously we've seen them lose a couple of games here. When you look at Caleb Love, he's all the way up to 9,000 now. Basically broke the slate. If you had him in last Saturday, like you were jumping up and down at the amount of fantasy points he was ringing up. But he's got a 27% usage rate, 32% shot rate. giving you some assists, giving you some steals. The thing is with these guys is that him and Davis, they're not shooting great from three, right? Like Caleb Love shooting 24% from three, RJ Davis shooting 28% from three. When you look at Indiana, right, like they allow opponents to shoot threes. They're 253rd in the country in opponent 3-point rate. So, and these guys are going to keep chucking, right? That extra bonus on DK is going to be pretty valuable, especially if they start racking up assists and steals in this matchup, which should be one of the faster games, more back and forth games that we have on the slate. So you can also look at RJ Davis. I don't know if I want to pay $8,900. I didn't want to pay the price tag last week or last game. And even though he's shooting a ton and gives you some of that assist upside, I would rather just spend the extra $100 and get Caleb Love. Then you always have to talk about Pete Nance, and his price point is ticking up too, right? And the metrics aren't quite as nice as the big three there, but he's someone that's more contrarian. You know he's going to come in at low ownership.
Yeah, it definitely feels like Nance is going to be a little bit overlooked, but I think the story for the Tar Heels for tomorrow's slate is every single one of them is coming in having gotten an increase, right? Granted, that game against Alabama, they all pretty much walked away with flames next to their names, right? So
yeah, multiple,
rightfully so. But on this slate, I'm not sure how we get up to them. We talked a bit about Baycott, coming in off the top. That shot rate is dramatically lower than it was last season. My take on Saturday kind of remains the same, right? Like if North Carolina is struggling a little bit, it would seem like at some point they're really going to go back to letting the big man eat. Is that becoming decreasingly or increasingly less likely as we get further into the season, or do you think that breakout game's coming?
Yeah, I mean, they're shooting a lot of threes still. And Love and Davis are taking a bunch of shots. Leaky Black's taking shots. So their strength is these forwards, right? Like Baycott and Nance. Like this is supposed to be a dynamic duo like Baycott and Manic were last year. So I think at some point we'll start to see as we get through the season that, man, getting these price increases on these guys, I don't really know if this is a game that I want to stack. Like I may just be looking at one piece on each side. Because this is really tough to you could game stack it, right? We just saw this team play into the almost a 200 total, so I don't mind it, but there's just some other routes I'm probably wanting to go, but I'm definitely gonna have exposure to Baycott and Love for sure, mostly in one-off settings, but you can go 2-1 just on the Indiana side with some of they have a little bit more value and some prices that are a little more playable. So don't mind going 2-1 maybe on the Indiana side and running Love or Baycott from the Tar Heel side.
So Baycott is carrying that nice little questionable flag. It sounds like he's got an ankle injury, but he is expected to play. But nonetheless, keep an eye out on that and make sure that he is on the court as we get ready for tip-off tomorrow evening. Let's shift gears over to the Indiana side of this one. Indiana comes in playing a really solid brand of basketball, right? Top 15 in both offensive and defensive efficiency. Play at a decent pace, right? Fast enough, kind of faster than average. So on the Hoosier side of this one, a couple of guys with some pretty lofty price tags. You want to start there with Indiana?
Yeah, we got to talk about TJD. I mean, he's 9,300, so that's a huge price tag, right? But I mean, the guy's only played 25 minutes a game, and he's gonna in this matchup, he's probably gonna get 35 to 38. And in the 25 minutes, he's been putting up 35 fantasy points, so well over a fantasy point per minute. So I think he's someone that has a massive ceiling, especially when you have someone like Baycott who's going to be in the paint a lot. Like, you just hope that TJD doesn't get into foul trouble. Don't think he's going to be primarily guarding him. But when you look at TJD, right, you get everything, right? You get the usage, you get the shots, you get the rebounding, you get the assists from the big man. Still get the blocks, so he's just a stud all the way around. That's a huge price tag on these type of slates, man. These price tags are just absolutely tough to swallow. I mean, we've seen balanced builds just tearing it up recently, so there's a lot more value on this slate, and it's kind of ridiculous what some of these guys down at the bottom are priced at. So it's kind of easy to get to these guys. But they're going to, him and Baycott, they're going to have to come close to 45-50 to really start to hurt you if you don't have them. So don't mind it. Have a few shares of them. You can slide down to some of these other guys like Xavier Johnson. I don't know if I'm paying $8,500 for Xavier Johnson. that just seems like way too much. I just don't know that he has a 40 type ceiling in a tournament to really, bust you up. So the guys I'm more willing to look at are Race Thompson at 6,600. Like, he's gonna have to be on the court because they obviously going to play some bigs here, and he's the other big man here that can do some damage. He really kind of does everything right. Like, he's not super exciting in anything, but he does get a lot of blocks, and he can grab you some steals, and those are super valuable, obviously, when you're playing game stacks. So I don't mind having Race in there. Minutes maybe a little bit of concern with him. Jalen Hood-Schifino, he's coming in with a 23% usage rate and a 22% shot rate, dishing out some dimes as well. So, if you want to take a shot at him in a game stack environment at 5,800, I don't mind it. I think the guy that everybody's going to be looking at, though, is going to be Tamar Bates, the one-time Longhorn commitment when Shaka Smart was here, but found himself over to Indiana. 3,900 is kind of a crazy price tag for kind of what we've seen lately from Bates. I mean, the usage rate and the shot rate's not something we're going to really jump up and down about. But last game, 32 fantasy points. He's shooting 40% from three. And when you look at North Carolina, how they profile, they're 241st in the country, and the opponent 3-point percentage, they're giving up nearly 36% from three. So, this kid's shooting almost 40% from three. And he's, getting some minutes. I mean, mid-20s, and you don't mind that at 3,900. So he's someone in a game stacking environment that I'm probably going to have some exposure to, and probably more, hopefully more than the field.
So sticking with Bates here, with in your estimation, is some of the additional run that he's been getting because of the injury to Trey Galloway, and as Galloway practiced on Monday, do you think that a return from Galloway potentially takes some of the wind out of Bates' sails?
Yeah, I mean, it could hurt him a little bit, but I don't think it's going to be that huge of a deal. I mean, the kid was a highly rated recruit, right? I'm expecting him to get some run here in the 20s regardless of it. So for me, it's I'm not afraid to drop him in there. He's been starting, so it's not like, it's not like Trey Galloway is going to, come in here and just completely run him off the court. So no, I think you're safe to plug in Tamar Bates and see what happens at 3,900, especially in a game stack. I'm not going to one-off him really in this scenario. It's more of if I'm trying to get TJD and Baycott in, right? He's probably the next guy I'm slotting in to relieve some of that salary.
So kind of tracking along with the Hoosiers, a lot of people like to pay up for production, right? TJD is expensive, but he has gotten to 45 twice so far this season. So he's got to pass the value. Tamar Bates, like you mentioned, one of the more attractive value options on the slate. Does that leave guys like Race Thompson and Jalen Hood-Schifino generally overlooked? Do you think there's maybe some leverage on those two guys?
Yeah, I think there is some leverage. In particular, Race is interesting because he just does so many different things. I could see Race putting up 32 at 6,600. That's pretty solid. We're actually going to see what Indiana is going to do rotation wise and things like that in this game. So there's a little bit of risk right now because I think obviously when you're playing a North Carolina team that was number one in the country, that you're obviously going to put what your rotation is probably going to look like during your really tough games. We'll see that. So I'm expecting Race to at least get 25 plus minutes, and he can do damage. We've seen that over the last couple of years.
Race coming in with 2 or more stocks in 4 out of his last 5 games. So a lot to like about that call. Let's move on to our second game. This one is an absolute powerhouse. Looking at a 141-point implied total between Purdue and Florida State. Boilermakers coming in as the 5th-ranked team in the country and looking every bit the part. 4th in offensive efficiency, 27th in defensive efficiency, as has been the case with Purdue for a while, as has been the case with a lot of Big Ten teams for a while. 323rd in tempo, right? So very efficient, playing at a snail's pace. What is it that we like about the Boilermakers for tomorrow's slate?
Yeah, you like the matchup. Florida State hasn't been great. And for me, it comes down to 3 guys. It's a pretty easy team from a fantasy perspective. It starts with Edey. That's our guy, right? Just a ridiculous player, right? He's getting close to 30 minutes a game. Like, we always wondered what that would look like, and it's resulted in 44 fantasy points a game. So, he's entering that that 5-digit territory, the 9,700. That's a steep price tag, but I mean, the guy's got a combined 43% rebounding rate and almost a 10% assist rate. So, he can pass out of a double team, an 8% block rate. So, man, he's just got such a high floor, right? He stayed out of foul trouble, which was another concern, right? That could always rear its head, but you can't play the game and you can't make lineups based on whether or not you think someone's going to get into foul trouble. So, if he's going to give you 45 to 50, 9,700 with all the value, I mean, you can slot that in pretty easily if some of these other top guys bust. But it's tough, right? Because then you're giving away some of the balanced builds that are out there. So I love him as a cash lock, essentially. And tournaments, like now that the price tag is here, I'm going to have some exposure to him. I'll probably have upwards of 20 lineups to start tomorrow. I mean, he's going to make, 3, maybe 4 of those lineups. So I'm not going to completely ignore him, but I'm not going to go, I just don't see him putting up a 55 and just absolutely hammering all my lineups. So, but I could definitely see him putting up a 48, piece and really setting me ahead on some of those lineups. So, outside of him, it's the two guards, Braden Smith, 5,400. Usage rate for him, it's good, 19%. Shot rate, not quite right, for only a 14% shot rate, which is why Fletcher Lawyer for $800 cheaper, it gives you a 25% shot rate. Now Smith's a little bit better with the handing out the dimes. At 20% assist rate and gives you a little bit of that steal upside. But Fletcher's been knocking down shots, and he's had 25 and 26 fantasy points in the last 2 games. So, it really rounds out for those 3 guys for me for Purdue. And, you can play Edey with a Fletcher Lawyer, kind of salvage some of that, and you're getting closer to that, that average salary by putting Lawyer with him. But just know that he's a little bit more shot dependent than someone like Braden Smith, who's a little bit more expensive.
Yeah, so I mean that gets you just under $6,000 per player remaining, and that was exactly the question that I was heading to. You mentioned you're going to have 3 or 4 out of 20 lineups with Edey in there. Are all of those lineups that you have Edey in there going to have either a combination of Lawyer or Smith running alongside him, or are you running those Purdue pieces solo?
No, I'll probably take advantage and play. If I'm playing Thor, I'll split the difference with them, right? Like, the thing about Florida State, right? Like, it feels like such a smash spot for Edey. I mean, Florida State's 350 as an opponent offensive rebound percentage. Like, just feels like Edey's going to gobble up the glass and get so many easy putbacks. But the thing is, too, like, Florida State, they're 334th in opponent assisted field goal percentage. So, essentially, when you're getting buckets, it's off of players getting dimes. So someone like Braden Smith on that 20% assist rate feels like someone that can pair well with Edey, even though you're spending that $800 more, right? Fletcher Lawyer can come out and get that 14% assist rate closer to 20-25% in that game. Now you're really cooking if Edey stays out of foul trouble. So, I'm probably going to be playing both together because Florida State, they just haven't been the defense of the past, man. They were typically a top 40, top 30 defense for many years, and they just don't quite have it this year.
Yeah, I mean, Edey's already averaging 12 rebounds per game on the season. You get him in a spot where he can get some of his own boards, and he's really getting some nice upside to add on top of what looks to be a legitimate breakout season. I want to move over to the Florida State side. This is the side that is doing the pacing up. They run 78th in the country in tempo, 148th in offensive efficiency, 179th in defensive efficiency. But what they have working in their favor for these Seminoles, a little bit more favorable price tag. So how are you navigating the Florida State side of this game?
Yeah, man, for me, it's just a tough. Like, if I'm in a game stack, like if you think Florida State could keep this thing close, and I think what KenPom has it like as a 13-point spread. Yeah, you can play 2 of these guys. The guys I would prioritize would be like someone like Cameron Fletcher, because that means that he's doing all kinds of things all over the court, right? He's scoring, he's getting rebounds, he's creating for others. He's getting those steals and blocks that are over 2%. Like, he's just making things happen. He's gonna have to be all over the floor for this thing to even be close. Caleb Mills, just so up and down, man. Like, he was so good at Houston a few years ago, and 7,300, like, it's still a tough pill to swallow. I'm a little more interested in Matthew Cleveland. Like, he was the ACC Sixth Man of the Year last year, and he's 1,100 cheaper. The rates aren't great. He's still almost got a 2% block and steal rate, so he could chip in some of those metrics, but he's still just kind of trying to find it, right? Like, I feel like I've jammed him in on like 5% of my lineups, just praying that he can drop that 30, 35, just because we know he can get it done in different categories. We just haven't really seen it. I think a lot of that has to do with Darren Green and Jalen Worley, 53 and 3,700 respectively. Green's going to be a little more shot dependent, right? Like, he's 40% from three, but just doesn't do much else. And when you look at, like, Purdue's obviously solid defensively inside. So I think if you're going to take advantage of these guys, it's going to be from Purdue to giving up. And the teams are taking threes on these guys. And they're 239th in opponent 3-point rate because teams aren't going to want to go inside and challenge Edey at 7-4. So, I think the other thing that could help Florida State here is that, that Purdue, like, outside of Edey in the middle, like, there's nothing special defensively, it feels like. I mean, they're 291st in opponent turnover percentage. So the opponents really aren't turning over the ball. So it's more of a fact that, like, Florida State can turn the ball over a lot. So that's why Smith and Lawyer on the other side feel like they could be good plays with a little more upside, because Florida State can turn it over. But in the case that Florida State plays a solid game, right, which, I mean, that's probably a 2-to-1 dog right there. But someone like Cameron Fletcher and Mills are going to have to kind of control this game. And if you need the salary savings, maybe diving down to Cleveland, Worley and Green, it's a little bit tougher to play those guys. Worley's a salary saver at 3,700, so I don't mind it, but it's just a tough game stack from the Florida State side because it's just tough to pin, like, which one of these guys can actually do it.
Yeah, I wanted to highlight the Worley play there, right? I mean, $3,700. This feels like a slate, especially if you're stacking this game where you're going to need some salary relief. And at 3.7K, a guy that has a 24% assist rate, a guy that's got a 2% steal rate, right? Like, he's got enough outs to where he can get to value a few different ways. Even if this game ends up being ugly, which at least our guys at Ken Palm are projecting it to do so. So name to file away as kind of one of those last guys in as you're trying to save a little bit of money on your builds. We'll move on to our third game. This one is also pushing a total close to 140, 137 overall, but should be a bit closer. Ohio State and Duke. We'll start with the Buckeyes side here. Very efficient offensively, pretty solid defensively as well. Kind of middle of the road when it comes to pace. So for the Buckeyes, pretty reasonably priced here overall. Where do you want to start with your breakdown for Ohio State?
Yeah, for Ohio State, man, like, the pricing with Ohio State is it just makes me want to play them. Like, for them to get to 67 points, it feels like one, maybe even two of these guys could get there. Like Zed Key, right? Like, he's 7,500, but I just don't know that there's upside at 7,500, so I'm probably crossing him off. And then when you go down from there, it's a bunch of guys 5,200 and less. And if you're telling me that they're going to score 67 points, because Ken Palm has Duke favored here by 3. A close game, like, Justice Suing just went off last game against Texas Tech, who's really good defensively. A 54 bomb, right? Like, he looks fully healthy now. We talked about him during the offseason. Like, it felt like he was the guy that could challenge for league honors for this Ohio State team. And the usage rate is massive. It's 31%. His shot rate is crazy. It's 33%. Like, he does a little bit of rebounding, gets you some assists, has a 2% block and steal rate. So, like, at 5,200, man, like, at the forward position, and looking at, like, first look, right, like, it feels like you're just going to use your utility spots on guards because there's just so much value and so many good guards. I mean, I don't want to say he's a lock button, but he's going to be really tough not to play because he's very versatile too. I do worry about him and how he matches up with, Duke's got some elite athletes, right? So, how does that play out? And then you got, like, someone like Bryce Sensabaugh, who's more shot dependent. When he's on the floor, he's taking shots, he can score. He just doesn't really do much else. He's 5K. Ice Likely, he's 4,300. Like, I mean, talk about a guy that can get you some rebounds from the guard position, some assists. gets steals, gets blocks. Like, he's a nice outlet. And then Bruce Thornton, who we talked about this offseason too, is going to be a critical piece of it. Like, so they need a point guard, right? And this is the kid right here. So they're going to give him the keys, right? They gave him 39 minutes last game. These 3 straight over 22 fantasy points. He's 4K. The usage rate, shot rates, and stuff like that, like assist rate, you like it to be higher. But at 4K, like, I mean, he's talented, right? And it feels like some of these games, sometimes when you play these top teams, that really shines bright. So he's someone I'm looking to get a pretty large share of. Hopefully he can keep it going and get those minutes, stay up there. And then also Sam McNeil, like 3,600. Now the guy, he has to hit threes, right? But for every 3 at that price point, it's basically 1x. And he's playing 30 minutes, but I mean, he's super shot dependent. So, I mean, you look at all 6 of these guys and you're like, man, like it feels like 2 of these guys out of the 5 that are underneath the key, because I'm pretty much crossing him off. I'm really factoring in Bruce Thornton and Justice Suing, but I don't mind. I'm going to have Likely. I'm going to have Sensabaugh. I'm going to play some McNeil, not heavily, but I'm going to have them sprinkled out. I like them as one-offs because you got to figure 2 of these guys, right, will get to 25 to 30 fantasy points and 5K, right? That's 6x. So it feels like this is a team to target, not to go overboard, but the pricing is really nice.
Yeah, I mean, on a slate where it feels like the biggest question mark is how do you address forward, it seems like at first blush the answer very well might come from this game. I want to look at the 2 kind of 5K options that you mentioned there, Suing and Sensabaugh. It would seem to me, right, kind of following your logic, they're implied to score 67 points. Yes, Sensabaugh is a bit more shot dependent, but he's got a really high usage rate. He's got a 36% shot rate. So logically, a good amount of that scoring should come his way. And we know in DFS, people love to chase, right? So I would imagine that Sensabaugh is going to be a fraction the ownership of what Suing is carrying in. Is that kind of the same line that you're taking on this one, or am I getting out ahead of myself?
Yeah, I don't think he's going to be owned at all. And I think that's it's tough, man. He really has to make shots, and 67 is not the biggest total, right? But 2 of these guys got to get there, right? And it just feels like it's just assuming like he just went off for 54 against a really tough tech team. Like he's 5,200. I need a forward. Like you just click him in, right? And you're gonna move on, right? You're probably not gonna play both together. If you think this game goes over, like play both together with Bruce Thornton and run it back with maybe a Duke guy. Duke's tough on pricing, but the Ohio State side, man, like I'm gonna struggle. Like I'm gonna be like, I can see at some point or just being like right for a lock, like I have too much Ohio State because it's just the pricing is just so good.
So you mentioned running it back with a Duke guy. Let's shift over to those Blue Devils. John Shire's got these boys playing a really impressive brand of basketball. 21st in offensive efficiency, 30th in defensive efficiency, playing a little bit slower than maybe they have in years past. But like you mentioned before, super talented roster, but they also carry a price tag that would reflect that. So how are we approaching the Blue Devils tomorrow?
Yeah, Filipowski is 8,500. Just doing everything. I worry a little bit about Lively. So I worry about if Lively's actually on the floor, and Lively's 4,200. Like for the guy that was the number 1 recruit in the country, he should not be 4,200. Well, 1, he started off with injury, and 2, he just can't stay out of foul trouble. If he can stay on the floor and plays 25 minutes with his shot blocking ability, rebounding ability, and putback ability, like he's talented. That could be a 5-6x spot. That's if he can stay on the floor, which we really haven't seen. So it makes Filipowski at 8,500 really tough, especially when you have Baycott and TJD and some of these other guys we'll talk about at the very top, right? And you sandwich that in. If you think it's a game stack environment, don't mind Jeremy Roach, like at 6K, like you know what you're going to get from Roach, right? Like he's going to lead the offense. He's going to get some dimes. He's going to get some steals. Like it just depends on whether or not he's going to knock down shots. And this Duke team just has been pretty pathetic from 3. So, if he knocks down some threes, that's going to be super important. And then you can also look at Mark Mitchell, right? He's 5,400. He just does everything. 2% block and steal rate. He can get you some rebounds, some assists. But when I'm looking at it, I'm comparing Mark Mitchell and I'm looking over at like Justice Suing and Sensabaugh, and I'm just like, let me grab one of those guys instead. So, for me, it's I'm going to sprinkle in Lively 2, maybe 2 out of 20, 1 out of 20. a tough call. I'll have a little bit of Roach and then maybe a Filipowski, but it's just not a Duke side that I'm not super excited to play because of price and also because of risk.
So you mentioned Lively getting into foul trouble. He's averaging 17 minutes per game so far this season. But looking over on the Buckeyes side, do you think that any of these forwards or any of these big men for Ohio State profile in a way that would potentially lead Lively into foul trouble? Or do you think that this might be a game where he gets a bit more run and kind of stays out of foul trouble?
Zed Key could put him in foul trouble. He's a big body. Like, he's just gonna bang with him, and you could see him easily getting in foul trouble. So that's why my exposure said 2, but I'm like, man, if that's 10%, I don't know if I want to be there. But he's someone that could easily block some shots, get put packs in 4,200. Like, that's just too cheap for him. But yeah, Zed Key could really put him in some trouble.
So are you gonna trot out any Blue Devils just by themselves, or are they really just in that kind of run back territory?
Probably a one run back territory, maybe a one off here and there, but they're not a primary focus for me.
Got it. So we will move on to our next game, Miami and Rutgers. Another game with a 137-point total. Another one projected to be relatively close. We've got a 3-point spread on this one. Let's go over to our Hurricanes, playing pretty well offensively, well enough defensively, and kind of middle of the road from a tempo standpoint. So take a look at the Canes. Where are we starting our builds there?
Yeah, I think I'm really excited about this game, and I probably shouldn't be because this could be one of the ugliest games on the slate, but it could be a feast. I mean, we know Rutgers, right? They're super tough defensively. For Miami, right? Norchad, he's been amazing. Ormier, he's 8,600. Like, please, can he play 35 minutes? He would put up massive scores. But a little bit of foul trouble last game. Just kind of gives you everything across the board. Great. He's obviously Sun Belt Defensive Player of the Year. And he can just block shots, right? But this is a small Miami team, right? It goes as the guards go. So you're looking at Isaiah Wong. He's 7,200. You got someone like Nigel Pack, who had a pretty good game last game. So that was actually pretty nice. He's coming in at 5,500. Wooga Poplar, he was I think he got a price decrease from last game. I think he was I think it was 4K last time out, and actually played really well. So you can see what Larry Naga's doing. He's doing what he did last year. Like, he's going to play 4 guards pretty much the entire game, and it's going to be based around Wong, Pack, Poplar, and Bensley Joseph, who I wish I had more of. I probably would have taken down that tournament. He's got a price decrease too. He's 3,200. I mean, he's going to play 25 to 28 minutes. I know the matchup's not great, but like, he can give you some assists. He's shooting 35% from 3. Like, that's the thing though, right? Like, Rutgers is super dangerous. Like, I don't know if Miami gets to 70. Ken Palm likes him to get there, though. That's more probably because of the style that Miami plays. Like, it's almost feels like it's sped up, but it's just because they have 4 guards just running around. In the half-court sets, just creating havoc and scoring points. So, yeah, if I had to rank the guards, right, like Isaiah Wong, 7,200, that's probably too much to pay for him and what could be an uglier matchup. So I'm really looking at Nigel Pack again, and then, Poplar and Joseph as some cheap salary savers. I wish I could get to Ormier, but he's going to have a tough matchup against Cliff on the other side. So, the thing about Rutgers, they'll give up some threes. Their rate is 233rd in the country for their opponents. So, they'll allow some threes to fly, and Miami's not terrible from behind the arc.
Yeah, they're definitely not. I mean, especially considering how many guards they trot out there. For me, I have to continue to tell myself that there's going to be a point where we will look at a 5.5K Nigel Pack and just laugh at how inexpensive he is. And you're spot on with some of these secondary guards with Poplar, with Joseph. Both of them are coming in getting $400 and $300 haircuts respectively. So might as well strike while the iron is hot there. Moving over to the Scarlet Knight side, 107th in offensive efficiency, very tough defensively, 10th overall, middle of the road when it comes to tempo. Anything to like for the Rutgers side of this game?
Yeah, I think these guys could go over, so I'm liking them a little bit too much. Cam Spencer, like 8,800, like the guy's just been so good. 36 fantasy points, but the price tag is too high. Like, Like, could he put up a 40? Yes, he could do that. But I just like the guys that are like when you factor in Cliff Amourier at 7,800 and what he could do against this small team, like Norchad is only 6'7", and then you're going to put Jordan Miller 6'7". You're going to put a bunch of guards out there, and at a certain point, you're going to have like a bunch of guards out there and one of Miller or one of Norchad. Like, it's just going to be like Cliff. I don't know what his price pick prop is at rebounds, but it feels like he could just gobble up like 15 tomorrow. I mean, he's got 34% combined rebounding rate, 30% shot rate. Like, I mean, when you look at it, like before last game, put up a 47, a 38, a 50, a 38. So like, yeah, there's a big time ceiling here for him if he doesn't get in foul trouble with these guards creating havoc, right? But 8% block rate, like the guy's just a usage monster this year, and the price tag really hasn't caught up yet. So I really like him. Caleb McConnell, first game back. I mean, 14 fantasy points in 25 minutes. Like, he is an elite defensive player. Can grab you some steals. Should be able to make some shots. Hopefully, if he plays close to 30 minutes, like you really got to like that 4,200 price tag. You got to think he's probably going to try to take out Wong or Pack. So that's a tough matchup on their side. But really what I like for these guys is the other forwards that are here, right? Mag and Hyatt, like 3,800 and 3,400 respectively. And you look at Mag, right? Like he can kind of give you a little bit of everything. He's 2 straight games, over 20 fantasy points, even though it's more in limited role. And then, Hyatt here, I mean, he's seen 30 minutes and he's averaging 27 minutes for the season. I mean, he hasn't had a game where he's been under 15 fantasy points. He's 3,400. So like you're almost 5X just based on his lowest performance of the year. And now he's a forward going up against, a smaller team. It feels like he's in a nice spot. You just kind of worry about minutes. But if Amoria gets into foul trouble, like Mag and Hyatt, they have 20 plus fantasy point upside at almost the bare minimum.
So I'm actually going to put you right on the spot with regard to Amourier, averaging 10 rebounds per game this season. His opening line on Prize Picks for tomorrow is 8 rebounds.
Yeah.
You like going over there?
Way over. So here after the show, we are placing a large bet on that, and he'll get 2 fouls in the first 2 minutes. So we can cross that one off the list.
So you mentioned that you are going to potentially have way too much Rutgers. Are you playing any of these guys together? And if so, which ones do you like pairing up?
Yeah, I don't know if I want to play Spencer. Like I might have one Spencer with – it's just tough to play Spencer and Amourier together. Just because the price tag's right. I mean, you could do it because I just don't know if Spencer has the upside, right? Like, I feel like you could play McConnell with the Amourier and even a Hyatt, right, and get a 3 and then run it back with a 1 from the Miami side. It's just tough to pick which guard. I don't even mind going naked in this game, going 2-0, 3-0 on the Rutgers side. Like, I feel like this could be a bad matchup for Miami. If you look at like Miami and what to exploit with them, and they're 266 and opponent offensive rebounding percentage. So like Amourier should just like gobble up offensive rebounds too and get easy putbacks. So he's someone that I'm really, really looking at hard. And this game could go one of 2 ways, right? This could actually break out into a run and gun type scenario, or this should be like Rutgers just puts the beat down on these guys defensively.
Yeah, definitely one to watch. But I mean, if nothing else, teams that are playing at a decent enough pace, right? So Rutgers can certainly lock down anybody, but we don't have to worry about this one, potentially becoming, a snail's pace and the under coming in by a good margin. We'll move on to our next game. This is one that is projecting to run a little bit slower. Michigan State and Notre Dame currently carrying a 134-point total. 2-point spread favoring Michigan State, so 68-66 is the Ken Pom projection for the Spartans. I mentioned the tempo, 315th for them, playing a decent brand of offensive basketball, 19th in efficiency there, 48th in defensive efficiency. So kind of classic Big Ten model here for the Michigan State Spartans. Anything that you're liking on this side of the ball?
Yeah, so I know we typically do 3 showcase games, right? This is a 12-gamer tomorrow. Bigger price pool than what we normally see, 3K to first. Felt like we had to talk about this Rutgers Miami game and also this Michigan State and Notre Dame game. The reason for Michigan State is because, like, Notre Dame, they're 168th in defensive efficiency, right? Like, they're not the greatest defensive team. And it feels like Nate Laszewski can get into trouble on the defensive side, and Hogard and Walker can absolutely create. I mean, Hogard has a 40% assist rate. He's 7,900. He's not going to be owned. I don't think he's going to be owned at all. I mean, he's a 28% assist rate. Like, you wish the shot rate was bigger, but he has a 2% steal rate. Like, he's more of a boom bust play. That price tag is so hard to swallow, but we've seen in the past this guy go for 40. Like, so am I saying it's going to happen? The game total would say otherwise, but probably a lone guy. I might have one share of him, maybe two, to see if it happens out of 20, 25 lineups. Now when I hit the sleep tonight, wake up, I'll be like, I need 5 more. But he's someone I'm gonna have some exposure to. Tyson Walker, kind of the same thing. You get a little bit of a savings there, 300. Not quite the upside, but a little more consistency, more of a cash game type option. But I don't know if you want to play him in cash for 7,600. Just feels a little more expensive. Joey Hauser is the guy that really looking at here. Like, he can't do anything defensively, but he has to be on the floor in order for Michigan State to score. And he played 36 and 38 minutes the last 2 games. Like, he can grab some rebounds. He's a good shooter. The thing about Notre Dame is, man, I love Notre Dame from a fantasy perspective, and this is probably what gets me in trouble, but it also shoots me up to the top a lot of times. They're on the slate. Like, Notre Dame plays 6 guys, right? So on their side, which we'll talk about in a second, like, there's just a bunch of guys on the floor forever, right? But then defensively, like, they don't turn teams over. They're basically dead last in opponent turnover percentage. So the opponents, they don't turn the ball over. So there's not that fear of like, oh no, they're going to get locked down. They're 350th in offensive rebounding rate. So, they're really just getting one shot on the Notre Dame side. Now, most of the time they're making it because they're great shooters, right? But the fact that they don't get second chances. And then their opponents, Notre Dame is allowing 36% from 3. So, like, Michigan State, like, Tyson Walker, Hauser is a good shooter. Like, guys can knock down threes. Like, that's that extra bonus point. And then you got to look at someone like Pierre Brooks. I think he's going to be popular. He's 3,800. Like, he has to play right now due to the injury to Hall. We'll see about Akins, right? Like, he's questionable right now. But he played 30 and 35 minutes. Like, he did some people some wonders on that last slate. So, people are going to go right back to him. Probably going to draw over 10% ownership, maybe more. But you look at the metrics, like, the teams that play against Notre Dame, like, you just stack the Notre Dame on their side and their opponents, a 2-2 or a 3-2. And it feels like if the game goes over that you were just so far ahead, even though this game's profiling to be more towards the mid, a little less than, a little lower than the middle of the pack here as far as game totals. But it doesn't take much on this slate. It's not like we're staring at a bunch of games in the, a couple of them 150s that you're like praying go under. Now, this is like a game where you can stack it, and if it goes over, and it hits an overtime, oh man, like it's just going to be fantasy goodness.
So it looks like Akins is considered doubtful for tomorrow's game. So that should draw more eyes and attention in Brooks' direction. But also guys like Trey Holloman, Jason Wittens, are slated to see a bit more run. Any interest in those guys as kind of one-off pieces here?
No. There's too much other value to play.
Too much other value, and all of the attention should and rightfully will go over to Brooks getting that additional run. Let's move over to the Fighting Irish side. You mentioned that they play a really tight rotation. That tight rotation has netted them a 27th ranking in offensive efficiency. Not quite as strong defensively, also playing a very slow brand of basketball. What do you like on the Notre Dame side?
Yeah, we like the Notre Dame side because they don't come off the floor. It's 6 guys, basically. Now, we have to pay attention to Hammond, right? I know he's closer to returning. Maybe you can give us an update on that. But, like, if he's out, like, let's talk about the guys that are there, right? Nate Laszewski, second in the country on KenPom in minutes played. So he's just going to be on the floor. Whether or not they use him is another question. Like, these guards can just start shooting threes and just completely forget about him. But, 19% shot rate, like, you wish it was better. But if the guy's on the floor for 39 minutes, like, does it really matter? Because you're going to be able to pick up some blocks or get some rebounds. Just going to be on the floor a lot, right? So, 8,900, that's a tough pill to swallow for someone that, absolutely, as Brody tries to knock down the door here. Tough pill to swallow. And you got someone like Dane Goodwin at 6,500. Like, these guys underneath are a little bit more playable. So with Dane Goodwin, he's shot dependent. He's going to have to make shots with playing 37 minutes a game. The guys that I like are 4,800 and less, right? You have Trey Wirtz at 4,800. He runs the offense. 22% assist rate, good shot rate. I mean, he's only played under 36 minutes once this year, and that was 31 minutes, so he's too cheap. Vanilla Lubin, he's the sixth man, right? He comes off the bench. He's 4,100. He grabs rebounds, can give you some assists for a big man. I mean, even some blocks here. They use him a little bit. He's 20% the usage rate. I mean, he's over a fantasy point, almost a fantasy point per minute, right? Like he had 33 in his last game. So at the forward position, I don't mind him, but it's tough not to play. Look at those Rutgers guys, but he's another guy that I'm probably going to slot in as a value saver at the forward spot. JJ Starling, stud 5-star freshman, a 22% usage rate. Like, he's got to make shots. He's a boom bust play. Like, we've seen him go for 40 fantasy points, and most of the time he's living in the teens, right? So you would just think that he could get to a 5X that would really help out. And then you look at it like how they profile. Like, Michigan State allows a ton of three-pointers, and they allow assisted field goals. So, you just feel like the Notre Dame side, there's just a ton of fantasy points to be had if they can get into the high 60s, low 70s.
Yeah, you mentioned that opponent assist field goal rate. That really makes Trey Wirtz jump off the page, right? 22% assist rate. And, we talk about this tight rotation for the Fighting Irish. Every single one of these guys is carrying a usage rate within a point or two of one another, right? So they're always on the floor, and they're utilized in a way that is best suited for their game and the way that they can contribute. So lots to like about the Fighting Irish side, if nothing else, because they're easy to project, right?
Yeah, absolutely, man. Like, it's so easy. And the price tags, you're just like, yeah, I'll take two of them and then get all the stars on the slate. It just makes it easier. So much.
Good.
I know, I was just saying, it just makes it easier to get the stars, right? When you have guys that are going to be on the floor, like Trey Wirtz for 36 minutes, yeah, give me some of that.
All day. Before we close out here, we've talked through a handful of games that we're going to prioritize. Any players across the rest of the slate that are going to be in your pool that will be kind of rotating around these games that we talked about? Let's start with some areas that we will be spending up in with some of your high tier players.
Yeah, I think more of a contrarian play at the very, very top, 9,500, right? Drew Peterson, we know he can score 40 to 50 fantasy points. He's playing Cal, that's just an ugly game, but he's not going to have any ownership, and he can get you a 45 piece. So, I may have one. I could see him being on a winning lineup if a bunch of value hits and you just stack up on him, Baycott, and another star. So don't mind it. More of a cash type player, very super contrarian play in tournaments. Mike Miles Jr. feels too cheap, 7,500. Providence, he just has star power, right? He's one of the top players in the country. It's a nice game environment, so I definitely like him at 7,500.
Yeah, definitely two of the kind of nicer pay up options. Going to be hard to get to Peterson at 9.5K, but there are a few ways to do it. One of the ways to do it is attacking the mid-tier value. Got a couple of guys here that are jumping off the page for you. Who do you like in that kind of 5 to 7K range?
Yeah, I think you have to look at Butler against Kansas State here. I mean, Jaden Taylor, he's 6,400. Eric Hunter's 5K. Taylor's just monster minutes. Ton of usage. He feels like he's their top dog now. And then Eric Hunter, he's more of a cash guy. He's just going to be on the floor. He can give you some assists, knock down a 3 or 2. I don't know if he's going to win you a tournament, but if you're playing smaller tournaments or cash, I feel like you should probably plug him in a few lineups. I'm not saying go all in on him, but don't mind him as a play at 5K. But there's just so much value that's tough to play these guys. So they're going to be low owned. You look at someone like Zurich Phillips, the SMU guys are way too cheap. Phelps is 5,700, playing a ton of minutes and usage, right? A ton of shots. And then Sam Griesel, I had him last week. No one was on him on that Saturday slate, and I had him in the lineup, and I think he went for 30 plus at 6,400. And I was like, yes, this is what he does everything for them. He just didn't have a couple of good games. That's what you look for, right? You look for guys that can get it done, but just haven't had a few good games. You get those guys at super low ownership, and bam, there you go, right? 6,900, a little bit tougher to swallow. The Boston College matchup isn't great, but I could see him getting a 35, and at 6,900, a couple of guys bust in that area, or maybe a star or two busts, a balanced build with him in it. Yeah, could make it happen.
Yeah, we talk a lot about how the balanced build has really been reigning supreme on the young season. A lot of it has to do with these mid-tier guys, right? Really all of them except for Hunter are guys that are going to lead their team in minutes and usage, or at least contend to every night, and they're going to be overlooked, right? So they need to be on the radar. Last category here, need to save some money to get some of these mid-tier and high-tier player in, where you're going for a little bit of salary relief.
Yeah, I think you got to go straight to tech. Like, they're playing Georgetown, and we know Georgetown doesn't play any defense. I'm not sure why Patrick Ewing is still there, but here we are. Jalen Tyson, he's 4,500. Like, I mean, kid can score 20, 25, and, you know, you're rolling at 4,500. You look at Pop Isaacs, like, he's 3,800. That's just too cheap for these guys going against Georgetown. We talked about Phelps from SMU. Well, you know, Zach Noodle, he's 4,400. And the matchup's not great against Texas A&M, but he takes a ton of shots, right? He's going to be on the floor a ton, so someone you probably want to get in. Zeb Jackson, he's 4K for VCU. You know, Baldwin's been out, so he's had to play more minutes. He's played between 32 and 34 minutes. That could be a spot. Hasn't been shooting well, but, you know, Vanderbilt, you know, could be a nice game here for him to kind of bounce back on the shooting. If he makes a couple of shots, like, now you're starting to look at like that 5X type game. On the Vanderbilt side, you know, if you guys are Manjon, he's 4,200. I mean, the guy's just playing a ton of minutes, right? So another guy, minutes, right? I mean, it's just Supreme, DFS. And then also on the Vanderbilt side, like 3,600 for Tyron Lawrence. Like there's not enough guard spots for me on this slate. I mean, 30 fantasy points last game. He's played 28 minutes or more in the last 4 games. Like, I don't know what I'm going to do here, man. Like, I wish I could just play, what is it, 8 guards tomorrow and just call it a day.
Yeah, I mean, we're talking about these last 12 guys kind of rounding up the player pool. Guard, right? So definitely going to have to pick our spots with
There's a legit way. Sorry to cut you off, man. There's a legit way to play Baycott, TJD, like Zach Edey with 5 guards that are, I mean.
Yeah, I mean, you pick off the last 8 names that you talked about. All of them are legitimately in contention to get the value and are priced in a fashion that can let you go all the way up, right? So would kind of deviate from that balanced build that has been winning more often than not, but is a different way to attack this type of slate. So a lot of flexibility, a lot of agency in how you want to attack this slate. Any closing thoughts on this 12 game before we get out of here, Mike?
Yeah, if you're mass multi-entry, you gotta be different, right? Especially these larger field tournaments. So, like, you know, stacking some of these games that are not the highest, but, you know, in the higher 130s. If one of those games goes overtime or just goes over, like, that's the game to have a 3-2 in or a 2-2 in. Yeah, and then mix it up between the balance builds and the stars with a ton of value that's out there, right? We hadn't had a ton of value in the last few slates, so you're going to be able to do what you want essentially on this slate. So I think just kind of mixing it up and matching. If you're playing single entries, a little bit tougher to kind of determine. You just got to pick which way you want to go, right? No right or wrong. Depends on kind of the size of the tournament, right? Like we talked about playing those 5 guards with those 4 guys, like with those 3 forwards, right? Like forward obviously doesn't have as much value, so you know you can slot in a bunch of cheap guards. Yeah, I think there's just a ton of ways to go, and you know, I think the biggest thing is just don't play anybody from Cal tomorrow. It's just a waste of time.
So we will cross Cal off the list. If you're checking in on YouTube before we get out of here, definitely let us know what you think about tomorrow's slate by dropping us a comment. Show us a little love with a like and a subscribe button before we get out of here. And if you are not already, get over to drroto.com. That's where you can find all of Mike's written work covering college basketball and a number of other subjects that will also get you access to our members-only Discord, where just like Sam, just like Corey, you too can get this bread.
Thanks for stopping by the office. Get your fantasy prescription by subscribing to the channel and checking out drroto.com. And until the next visit, be well and take care.